Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
And I'm Fiorella.
And we have a special guest with us today. His name is Teodrose. I hope I said it right. I say it wrong all the time. Fikremariam. And it's an Ethiopian name, and I'll let him explain that to you. But Teodo is the co-founder and the editor of the Ghion Journal. And I hope I said that right as well. Prior to launching the Ghion Journal, he was a political organizer who once wrote a speech in 2008 that was incorporated into Barack Obama's South Carolina primary victory speech. Damn. He is originally from Ethiopia and a direct descendant, 7 generations removed, of one of Ethiopia's greatest emperors, Teodrose. Teodrose too. He's going to explain it to me. We met him in Washington, D.C. at the Action for Assange rally. Tia, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Other than this COVID-19 that's kicking my ass.
You're getting muffled again, so let me hear you. Can we hear you?
Yeah, this is good?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I contracted COVID-19 last Friday, so I've been recovering from it. For those that have not experienced it, it's not a fun ride.
Yeah, it's not.
What are your symptoms?
So pretty much limited to body aches. I feel like I've been fighting Mike Tyson. Sore throat.
Yep.
That's pretty much it. And headaches.
Yep.
And
just weak.
Yeah, and going I don't know, this TMI, but going to the peeing every 2 minutes, like I'm an 85-year-old man.
Yeah.
Well, you must be somewhat old like me, because we had the similar symptoms. You know what I'm saying? Like my back and my body just felt like I was getting my ass kicked by Mike Tyson. I can tell you that much. What about your sense of taste and smell? Because the weed I smoked did not taste like the weed I normally smoke. It tasted like skunk.
Well, sometimes that's not a bad thing, is it?
Your microphone is really messed up.
All right, hold on. How is this good?
Yeah, you just got to stay forward on it, because we didn't hear your last sentence.
I said sometimes skunk is not bad when you have nothing else.
Not when you got the good stuff and the taste like skunk. That's the problem. Well, Tito, listen.
Yeah.
Once people see this video of you, they're going to go into your Twitter. They're going to look into you. They're going to see what you're all about. So let's just put it out there in the open, because I think we met. You heard me talking about election integrity. You were a supporter of Donald Trump, were you not?
No.
You weren't?
No, heck no.
Not at all.
I gave up on politics a long time ago. I was a vehement supporter of Obama in 2008. It took me 6 years to wake up. Once I woke up, I realized every politician in DC is full of, you know what, and Trump was no different. He was, as much as he said that he was against the deep state, he sure was tap dancing with them even at the very, I wrote an open letter to him at the 11th hour, when he had one chance at least to do something redemptive, which was to pardon Julian Assange and Edward Snowden. And guess what? He didn't. Meanwhile, he pardoned all his cronies. So, he is who we thought he was. So nothing surprises me there. I voted a long time ago that our politics is nothing but cyclical scams being purveyed on us. It depends on a pendulum swing from one end to the other every 4 to 8 years, which gives us the pretense of change when nothing changes. And so, you had 2000 Bush was a pendulum swing to 8 years of Clinton philandering, then, compassion, conservative, and all that kind of BS. Then after 8 years of Bush mangling the English language, you had a slick talking con artist, Obama, in 2008, come in and replace him. After 8 years of slick talking con artist Obama, you had Trump, who was supposed to be an outsider and a quote unquote populist. They all do end up doing the same thing, and now you have a pedophile in office. So change in America.
Whoa, we're gonna say you QAnon there, T.O.
Be careful, we're gonna get shut down. Wait, too late.
Oh, wait, too late. We already been demonetized and shit and stuff.
Hey, yeah. Welcome to the dark side. You have nothing to lose. The more they take away our platforms, that the less we have incentive to moderate ourselves. So,
yeah.
Well, you're here today because we're going to talk about the Black Panthers, because you did some work last week that really stirred up shit on Twitter and got everybody going crazy. You know, we've been big supporters of Fred Hampton in this house, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to speak for myself here when I say that for me, the reason why Fred Hampton got me just so mesmerized by what he had to say is it was really building a rainbow coalition.
Right.
And then, you know, we had talked about him working with the YPO before, but you wrote this article and a lot of people shared that and kind of went out there and saying that, you know, spreading that news that look what Fred Hampton is going to do to recognize who the true enemy is, who the real, where the real badness in America is coming from. I don't know if badness is the right word, but, you know, I mean, the nefarious actions, the sinister actions of fascism and shutting people down and cancel culture and that whole 9 yards. And he was like, Fred Hampton's, I'm going to work with these people who are diametrically opposed to me to get something done because, once again, we have to recognize who the real enemy is.
Right.
We've had a conversation about this before in school. I don't know about you, fam, but my generation, we didn't get to talk about the Black Panthers in history. There was one paragraph, one half a page. We spent the last 10 minutes of one class to be told that the Black Panthers were radical, that were violent, that just had guns in the street. But you tell a different story. And today you're also going to talk about the 10 points that we talked about. Yeah. But first of all, I didn't give you a chance to talk about what you do, your journal, and let's just kind of roll right into these points.
Sure. So first and foremost, as far as the Ghion journal, this is an endeavor that my wife and I started. It's been 4 years now. Actually, going on to 5 years now. When I was in homeless, and I was living in a shelter in Colorado. I was writing stuff on Facebook all the time, just, you know, every thought that I had, just having a stream of conscience. And so one day I wrote like an open letter to women. It was called Memo to She. And it was like extolling the virtues of womanhood and how women's strengths are different. And even, in fact, even more profound than men's, like where men have hubris, women have compassion, right? And this is not a blanket statement, but for the most part, you know, our strengths are different in that way. We're built for different roles up to a point. And a lot of times women are being judged against the strength of a man and devalued for the strengths that they have. So, of course, I got vilified by a bunch of ultra feminists. But my wife read it. Well, back then, I didn't even know her, right? But she read it and she was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So we connected. Then
Nice.
First day we talked for 5 hours. The first day, when I was living in a homeless shelter, I didn't have a penny to my name. I had to use a community phone in order to talk to her. You know, so that's how, you know, we linked. And then shortly thereafter, she was like, "Why are you just writing stuff on Facebook? Just get your own website." And so we kind of did a brainstorming, came up with the name Ghion Journal, and then the rest is kind of history as it's being written. And the whole premise of the Ghion Journal, by the way, the Ghion, or what we call in Ethiopia, the Abba Ghion, is what has been renamed to the Nile River, right? We've always called it the Ghion River in Ethiopia. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because in the Genesis, in the Bible, there's the Pishon, the Ghion, the Euphrates, and the Tigris, right? These are the four rivers mentioned in the Genesis. Of course, it gets renamed for a purpose. There's an agenda behind these things. Colonizers are always renaming you in order to rob you of your identity, erase your history, and shortly thereafter enslave you with their propaganda. So the Ghion Journal is, our whole premise is to not necessarily to say that we are the truth, but to reclaim the truth as best as we know it, and to get people to question, always question. So I write about faith, I write about, obviously news, politics, love, whatever, all kinds of stuff. Lately, I've been focusing a lot on COVID-19 and the vaccine, and also the wildcat strike that we've been organizing. And I've also been reaching out to the U.S. military a lot, because when the shit hits the fan, there's going to be a choice that men and women in the Army, Marines, Air Force, and Navy are going to have to make. And their motto, it says God honor duty, or God honor country. And some people say, instead of God, I think they said, I forgot the exact. There was a speech that MacArthur gave, and I think it was God honor country. but sometimes they replace God with something else. But all that said, there's an oath that they all take, and at the above country is honor, and above honor is God. And even if they're atheists, they know within their hearts that there's a calling, that there's a decision that they must make, a moral decision. And so, I like to think that when that time comes, they're not going to just blindly obey immoral orders and actually live one in their hearts. And by the way, when we were in DC, 2 weeks later, you saw DC became an occupied zone. I handed out over 1,000 cards directly addressed to the U.S. military, and the response I was getting was overwhelmingly in favor of what I was doing. And in fact, there's a poem that I embedded in the article, even the one that I sent you, the one that says "Threat Calm, Charlie." That I wrote when I was in Colorado, when I was homeless, and it's called "Silent Salute." And I read that to at least 200 reservists and police officers, and in almost every instance, like let's say 50% of the time, they cried every time I read that to them, as did I. So they're human, they're one of us. So there's just a moment of overreach that I'm waiting for. I think that moment of overreach is coming up very shortly.
And so you've been a proponent of the what is it, the 10, is it 10 points of the Black Panther Party? Can you start explaining the platform?
Yeah, so basically what the Black Panther Party did, so I'm going to actually read it off to you. But before I do that, what they basically did was came up with these 10 points, and anyone that agreed with the 10 points, actually, let me see here. So what we want now, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our Black community. 1. 2, we want full employment for our people. 3, we want an end to the robbery by capitalists on our Black and oppressed communities. 4, we want decent housing, fit for shelter or human beings. 5, we want education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in the present day society. 6, we want all Black men to be exempt from military service. 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people. 8, we want freedom for all Black men held in federal, state, county, and city prisons and jails. 9, we want all Black people, when brought to trial, to be tried in court by a jury of their peer group or people from their Black communities, as defined by the Constitution of the United States. 10, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. There's another 10 points that says what we believe, but the main one is what we want, right? So there was actually 2 sets of the 10-point plan. And the way that this worked is very simple. And I've been emulating that platform of theirs for a very long time. Anyone that came in and read those 10 points would then be given a choice. Do you agree? Yes or no? And if they say yes, that was it. Welcome to the Black Panther Party. And in that way, once they became part of the Black Panther Party, they'll be given or empowered to go out to their communities and talk to recruit other people. So a doctor would talk to other doctors, right? He would, if you try to go talk to a bunch of dope boys on the street, it ain't gonna work. And a pimp will go talk to his pimp friends, or his workers, because a pimp talking to doctors ain't gonna work. So that was effectively what they perfected was micro-targeting in ways that Obama actually perfected in 2008. But they did that, almost 50 years prior, right? Or 40 years prior. So it was brilliant what they did. What they teach us about the Black Panther Party now is that they picked up a gun, which they did, by the way, to their demise. And it was idiotic for them to do that, by the way. What the federal government feared was not their guns. In fact, that gave them a pretext to viciously go after them. What they feared, I used to say, it's not the guns that the government feared, it's the spoon, because they were feeding people. They opened up soup kitchens, they opened up clinics, they opened up daycares, And their whole foundation was about empowerment and self-sustenance. This is something that LBJ and the racists in the Democrat Party and Republicans too, but really LBJ was livid over. You know, if you know anything about the Great Society and the war on poverty, it was nothing but a stealthy campaign to destroy the Black family, using warfare as a carrot to incentivize the breaking up of the Black families. In fact, a lot of Black leaders back then told them, please don't do this. Why would you give an incentive for a father to leave the house? Because you can't have two people living in the same household. So fathers left in droves, and the next thing you know, you have the decimation of the Black family. So that was the Black Panther Party offered another solution, one that entailed community reinvestment, community empowerment, and the government would not have any of that. And by the way, the same thing, I was talking to Niko House, the same thing happened when Tulsa was bombed by the US government, right? So in Tulsa, Black Wall Street, it was the banks, the Black banks that were actually thriving in that region. And, you know, that was right around the time when the Federal Reserve was instituted, and you couldn't have a competing interest. So you had to destroy whatever was not part and parcel of the Federal Reserve, which the Black banks were not. So they did that. So this is the, you know, the American government is the biggest gangsters in the world. They make us, Al Capone look like a saint compared to what they do.
Yeah.
No. Well, my question is this. Do you have a question? Can I go into it? My question is this. We often talk about the unity, of Black people and white people working together within the Black Panther Party. You know, you see Fred Hampton up there. You'll see a lot of white men dressed in Black Panther gear right there, ready to fight side by side with some of the Black Panthers. At what point did Fred Hampton kind of build this rainbow coalition to say, hey, listen, you're getting kind of screwed the same way we are, you know, maybe not at the same level, but get them to say, hey, look what's going on. Let's join our forces together. And how did he get that done?
Yeah, so, Fred Hampton was a visionary.
Your sound again.
Oh, hold on, let me get closer. No, Fred Hampton was a visionary in that way. He believed that, like Black folks at 13% of the population, you can go and be able to make a difference against the rest of society on your own. It's fool's talk, right? And it's a fool's errand.
Right.
So he realized that the only way that he could have a chance to liberate his people was by building a coalition. There's the same thing, by the way. He's not the one that did this. Martin Luther King came to that realization.
Yeah.
Malcolm X
came to that. Yeah. Post Mecca, we talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a common thread to all these things. They all got assassinated.
Yeah.
By the U.S. government. I know people say conspiracy theorist. If you know anything about the COINTELPRO,
yeah,
I would take it as a badge of honor these days to be called a conspiracy theorist. But I forgot. Was it you that said? I don't know who said this, but you could read people verbatim what the CIA admitted to, and people will say you're a conspiracy theorist. I'm like, this was in FOIA revealed by the CIA.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're very conditioned in this way to question anyone that doesn't have the blessing of the establishment. So
yeah,
it's what it is. Okay.
New paperwork too, T, showing that the FBI connected all the way up to the top. Knew about the assassination. Yeah, J. Edgar Hoover was there. So I guess we ain't conspiracy theorists no more.
Right. Yeah. Oh, man. Which, by the way, why, again, Trump was a sellout, because he had the chance. He had the chance to declassify those things. Right. If he really was about, if he was going to be against the deep state.
Trump, right?
Yeah. What he didn't do nothing.
Yeah.
What can he do? You can't send an alligator to drain the swamp.
Yeah. Right. I love that. But why do you think there's so much? Let me post it to you this way, because you started talking about how, like, by today's standards, the YPO and other groups that Fred Hampton and the Black Panther Party reached out to would be vilified and just like shoot away. I mean, we're talking about Confederate flag wearing people, whether they were all, racist or not. I don't think every single person was racist. I think a lot of them were working class, and then they slowly adopted a lot of that. But there is an element of, where people today are so turned off by the Confederate flag and the monuments, like they're taking them down. They're just so focused on that. AOC in one of her speeches was talking about how these Republicans that are wearing this Confederate flag, I don't want to work with them because that's, that is a betrayal to our country. Well, Fred Hampton was able to work with people who wore that, and then they slowly gave up those emblems. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's the beauty of conversations. By the way, I know this firsthand. When I was living in Greenville, in a homeless shelter in Greenville in 2015, the first couple of weeks I was there, I run into this, I hate these labels, white and black, but I run into this white dude that had, that had bald hair. That makes no sense. That was bald. And he was looking at me like he just hated me to the core. Yeah. And of course, I was bitter back then, so I was just waiting for the opportunity to just punch him in the nose. So the first couple of days went like that, while I was just looking for him to say something to me. But then, like one day, I was smoking. This back there where I was smoking a cigarette. I was smoking a cigarette. He comes out looking for a cigarette butt. I forgot what they call it, shorts, I think, right? We see a bunch of homeless folks kind of just looking for the shorts of a cigarette. And so he was looking for one to smoke. And I said, I feel, I'm a sucker for these things. So I said, hey, I offer him a cigarette, right? And immediately, like, his demeanor changed. And then he sat down and I started talking to him about all the shit that I've been through in my life. The journey from being, first generation immigrant, losing my dad to cancer, just everything. And I wasn't doing that to be manipulative. I was just telling you. At the end of my, of that exchange, he apologizes to me. And then he tells me that up until that moment, every Black person that he's ever met was always from a distance. And the first time was when, his sister started dating a Black dude. So since that time, he hated Black folks, as an abstraction. But I humanized myself to him. And he apologized. So that conversation changed him. Now, whether or not he went back to his racist ways, who knows? But maybe he didn't. Maybe he went on to actually be the complete opposite. So conversations change people. Conversations can change bigots into not progressive politically, but into progressive voices. But this is not what the establishment wants. They want us to be divided perpetually. But this is how the hustle works in America, and really throughout the world. You pit races against each other. Race is nothing but an artificial construct. It's a caste system. I don't identify myself with Black for that reason, because it's nonsensical that the term Black was invented by racists, by slave traders. Trust me when I tell you, people in Africa, quote unquote Africa, even Africa, the whole continent used to be called Ethiopia, got renamed to Africa to honor Scipio Africanus, who was the Roman general that invaded the continent and killed tens of millions of folks in the continent. It's like Jewish people call themselves Hitlerian. We call ourselves African. It's just, anyways, all that said, Black and white are literally just artificial constructs. There's not one person in this world who's Black. If you compare my skin color, like if you compare my skin color to this color, like, can you see the difference? I'm not Black. and you, Craig, as quote unquote as light skinned as you are, bro, I see that white thing on your shirt that says "fam." Your color is not that, But they do this in order to divide us based on these stupid labels that are insulting. And so that's what Fred Hampton was trying to overcome, those divisions. Yeah. And these divisions are third rails. You touch them, you die for the most part if you have enough of a following. That's Fred Hampton's legacy, though, that he left us a blueprint But at the same token, speaking of tokens, you have a bunch of tokens and mainstream media and politics and Hollywood who perpetuate these divides, and they're getting paid very well to further the divides. So instead of actually being healing, they tear open the scabs of America's greatest sin in order to perpetuate and to further the ugly legacy of racism, and not to heal it, but to enrich themselves from it.
Yeah. I think that's just so great that you told us that story, whatnot, because I think a lot of people are telling those stories nowadays about how they changed their perception on what was going to be. I mean, I remember like it was yesterday what changed me, because I grew up in an Italian household where my dad was from Bedford Iversen, and that's where Biggie and Tupac.
Yeah, I know about that.
Yeah. And my aunts and my uncles, whatnot, I'm saying, being in that area and then kind of having to move, whatnot, there's the Bronx Tale. That's that traditional story of how, black and brown and white people, Italian people in particular, just fought each other in the streets. So me growing up, I heard the N word and the M word. There was the letter M. The Italians would use a certain word that was.
Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. It was made specifically, but for me, I'll never forget it because I was 18 years old and I was in a pool hall that I hung out with, and it wasn't the nicest guys that ran in that pool hall. And there was a group of Italian guys that were just kind of squaring off on each other. And it was about 7 or 8 people. And, these were guys that I've known that things would get hairy. They weren't the Cub Scouts. And it was one guy we called Black Ray. And the only reason why we called him Black Ray is because we knew a white Ray, and he was Ray, but that Ray was Black Ray. And he literally stepped in the middle and started talking and became a peacemaker. And later that night, we all hung out as friends, the whole group, whatnot. And I'll never forget it. It shook me to the core because here we are, traditionally, get these Italian people that would, that were at war in the streets of Brooklyn and the Bronx and that area that would speak a certain language, and you'd get this certain ideology of what's going on. But then for somebody to come in who, and just become the peacemaker, and it changed me for the rest of my life because I was mad at myself for thinking that way until sorry for getting worked up, but I was embarrassed and I was mad at myself for thinking that way. And it changed my perception from that day forward. And that's why I'm here today. And I don't ever bring up these statements or these situations when it comes to Fred Hampton to give myself some justification, to take some type of responsibility or blame off my shoulders.
Right.
I just desperately want to happen what happened in that pool hall together. And say, this is we're getting played here.
Right.
And we have so much more in common than we do apart, that we need to get our shit together and really move forward. So I thank you for sharing that story with me, because I think you also learned something there too that day, to see how a person that you think will just hate you for the color of your skin that can immediately just change, and you can see it in their eyes and the demeanor and everything. And it really is a beautiful thing.
By the way, you should not feel guilty because this is something that you experienced that I've experienced. Bias and prejudice are not contained to just one side. And I'm gonna get some pushback. Look, somebody once said, racism is about power and bigotry, right? So if you're just a bigot or prejudiced without the power to actually impact somebody, you're not. I don't consider that to be racist, right? But if you have biases, and then you then have the power to actually act on those biases and beat somebody's life, that's racism, right? So if I walk into a store in Alabama and some redneck is there, and he calls me the N-word, as far as I'm concerned, he's not a racist. I just laugh it off and call him the N-word back and leave. He has no impact on my life. And in fact, if I get pissed off at him, that says a lot more about me than it says about him. Now, if I go to a bank and the branch manager says to me, hey, it calls me the N-word, and then refuses to process my loan because of that, that's racism. So in that sense, Obama was racist. The people that I met on January the 6th in DC were not racist. And by the way, I found more, acceptance amongst those people that day than these liberal elites.
Yeah.
That cannot stand me because I actually have the audacity to express my own thoughts.
Yep.
There's more racism in Boston than there is in Alabama, I bet you.
Let's talk about that for a second, Theo, because Jonny has said that himself too, when he's like, I lived in Florida my whole life and I've experienced far more racism in progressive California because of these certain elite liberals who like assume everybody is from one country or etc. Or when you are a person of color and you are AOC and you follow the progressive mainstream narrative, and that's all fine and dandy. They'll defend you. They'll talk about your trauma, MSNBC, CNN. They'll do a whole narrative to focus on AOC's trauma. But when you are, say, challenging the status quo, challenging the national security state, challenging foreign policy, let's put people like, yourself, myself, Niko, Brianna Joy Gray, Justin Jackson, then we can even say Tulsi Gabbard. You see all these people of color, they are so hated by not just the liberals, but the progressives are attacking them now because they're not the tokenized, good tokenized Latinos or good tokenized Black people that are going to peddle the same talking points, but just better branding. And when you don't do that, when you don't know your place as a person of color, they get so angry at you, and then the racism comes out too. It's also like they get double mad at you because you're supposed to be just an instrument used for them to pat themselves on the back and say, "Oh, I'm a good white progressive." Yeah.
Look, I've never been called. The number one person that calls me a racist usually is some liberal white lady.
I know, you keep telling me that story. Some Karen.
I'm like, you don't really sense the irony of that, do you? But this is what. By the way, this is something that Malcolm X figured out a long time ago.
Yep. The white moderate.
So the white moderate and also the Black bourgeois. In fact, one of the most widely read articles at Ghion Journal is an article I wrote called The Wisdom of Malcolm X. He was warning us about these bourgeois hustlers.
Yep.
Right? It's the second most read article. And then the first most wide read article is The Absurdity of Saying White Privilege. And that one is actually read like the most out of all of them. But the one about Malcolm X is slowly catching up as well. But he realized a long time ago that, in fact, he said Republicans are like wolves and Democrats are like foxes. The only difference is that one smiles at you before he eats you. He's talking about Democrats, of course. So there's the only difference between the two major parties is that one is actually honest in the advertisement, which is Republicans. Democrats pretend like they love you and then stab you in the back. So, it never fails. And, here we are now, Biden would not be elected if it was not for the Black vote in South Carolina. He would not be elected if Claiborne did not come through and somehow galvanize Black folks to vote for him in South Carolina. And what has he done for the Black community? Zero. The very first thing that he did was, I think it was an executive action for transgender, and then he focused on everything else outside of the Black community. So, this is, I used to always say that Democrats love you up until the last election has been counted, or the last vote has been counted.
So I would say his executive order that really hurt the fact that you can get insulin for cheap prices too was really bad to the Black community. You know what I'm saying? Because it really took away cheap insulin prices and whatnot. And people who are in poverty, whether they're Black, white, Asian, anything, it doesn't make a difference. They need those discounts to get that insulin. And when you sign an executive order that says, hey, man, we're going to no longer allow you to pass on those savings, that hurts. And it hurts minorities more than anything.
No, it's all about the money. By the way, just something that just kind of came up while I was doing this. If I can read a quick poem that I wrote when I was actually in South Carolina, I think, this is actually in Colorado, in Wellington. It's called History's Malevolence. The middle ground is treacherous. Preaching unity to all sides, dangerous. Trying to find a universal language, creating consensus out of chaos is often laden with insults, profoundly onerous. It's easier rebuilding the Tower of Babel. But lend me an ear, brethren and sisters. What if I told you history is malevolent? Facts rewritten by victors and conquerors in order to split the masses into opponents. Propaganda to prolong injustice. What if I told you the Civil War, for example, to pick one of many instances, was truly not about slavery? It was about the economy, forcing one ideology over another, the powerful versus the feeble, a clash of the aristocrats and the prosperous, who duped the powerless to fight each other. Most quote-unquote white folks in the South were struggling as indentured servants, deteriorating into barrenness. Now the powerful spread lies, fracturing society into encampments, pains of the subjugated being used to hide the intentions of the system, in the process pitting one against the other. Racism is about power, but they deceive you into thinking that fellow victims are racist to obfuscate the true malevolence of bigotry, hiding those who believe society. What if I told you that the poor, quote-unquote, white folks in antebellum had more in common with the slaves than they did with nefarious slave owners? And only a fraction of society, the wealthy aristocracy, on both sides of the war, irrespective of location, thrived in the midst of hardship. The multitude on both sides living in destitution and squalor, as they teach that Lincoln was the great emancipator, educating us to elevate a president to the status of God for Black people. Maybe you should read Lincoln's speech, A House Divided, and you will realize that history is full of utter bullshit. Injustice only prospers when people are splintered and feed into the propaganda of the system. Did you get mad at me? Think of me as a sellout, as if I was dismissing the horrors of slavery or diminishing the pains of its legacy? Do you think I'm trying to erase Jim Crow? Will you accuse me of negating the terrors of Reconstruction? Or do you understand that the ancestors of Black and white, the children of the masses, irrespective of color, are besieged in poverty and squalor at this precise exact moment? For the Civil War is still raging as they pit races against each other, trying to instigate strife and friction as they manipulate society to rupture into racial warfare and hostility. Think about this for a moment. Who shares the burden of the broken, of Black folks who live in Chicago? Is it the bourgeois Congressional Black Caucus in DC? Is it the first Black president and the jive talkers like Sharpton and his ilk who live in Manhattan, partying in the Hamptons, attending soirees in Martha's Vineyard Chalet? Or do poor Black folks in the cities have more in common with their brethren than impoverished white people in the Appalachians? It's always easier to speak to individual grievances, to impassioned flames instead of spreading light. Insults follow the ones who preach universal justice. Applause given to those who demagogue incessantly. See, history is meant to cleave people, to teach that others are dissimilar. But in truth, the lives of most are made unbearable. Slavery has taken on a new concept where debt has become the new bondage and poverty is the new shackle. Most of us are ensnared in irrespective of identity, more and more falling into this depraved captivity. When it comes to historic injustices, the sins of a diabolical few cannot be blamed on the masses. Mussolini's army not too long ago terrorized my native land, Ethiopia, as mothers and children, innocent civilians, perished by the hundreds of thousands, chartered by chemical weapons. A Holocaust visited upon my ancestors. I can't blame Italians for the horrors of a murderous cabal, for there are masses in Italy suffering just like the masses in my country. The same message I preach to my fellow Ethiopians, those who are blinded by tribalism as they insult their countrymen, letting animosity overcome their emotions. This is the reason Ethiopia is shattering and why tyrants rule with an iron fist. Injustice making us forget about our common heritage, making us disregard that we are one people, united by one common struggle. It's always easier for the powerful to pilfer the citizenry and fleece us blindly as long as we are distracted by our differences. To white people, this message I reiterate. So-called minorities have identical struggles, the same burdens that you go through. So why get mad at the meager means of those who are broken by poverty, the pittance given to those caught in bleakness, instead of being outraged by the thievery being undertaken by the few very near class who we worship as they swindle our life savings? History is mendacious, truth subverted into propaganda. Instead of dwelling on past pains and residing in separable grievances, why don't we unite as one people? If you want to end injustice, stop monopolizing pain and understand one thing. we're all in this together, or we are all in this together, or we will suffer forever fractured. This is why I keep using quote marks around the words white and black, because these labels are pernicious. They prevent us from realizing our cohesion. We are more than labels. We are humans united by the same purpose. History is full of lies and divisiveness. It's in our hearts that we find humanity's oneness.
Wow. That was awesome.
I got to tell you, as a man, and I always make this joke too as well, but like being 66% Southern Italian, I make the joke about it, but we were like my family, we couldn't stand Christopher Columbus. We hated the Roman Empire. You know what I'm saying? We couldn't stand Mussolini because we were my family, they were like the poor peasants of Italy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? And they were treated like shit by the Northern Italians and stuff.
Yeah,
so I just want to make the whole naming of Africa, that Roman general too, as well.
And send us that poem so he can put it up when he edits.
Yeah, I'm going to put that up as you
Yeah.
so definitely.
By the way, who was the first victims? Who were the first victims of Mussolini?
The Southern Italians, the Sicilians, right? I mean,
Northern Italians too, but yeah, definitely Sicilians, folks down in the southern parts of Italy. But yeah, I mean, Mussolini for the most part just killed anyone that objected to his treachery. You know,
yeah.
The first victim of a tyrant is always his own people.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yep.
It's funny because we were sharing the redlining list, whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And my mother told me about this. We had to talk that she would keep her name because she was adopted by her stepfather and stuff. But she'd keep her last name because it was a Sicilian name on the low. She moved into an area where if you look at the redlining list, it was like Mexican, people of color, Southern Italians. And she just kept her mouth closed of her last name because she couldn't speak of that when they were growing up in Lindenhurst, Long Island. Listen, I want to get to the Workers Unite, the wildcat strike, whatnot, and talk about this too, because we have a little limited time here right now. What is this that you're throwing on? What does it mean by wildcat? How do people get involved? And how do we make this happen? Because you told me this is the last Hail Mary, this is the last chance, but this is some seriousness right now. This is the collective power. If we join together and shut shit down, then we can make change. But until we do this, we won't get no change.
Yeah. So the only thing that the rich listen to is when you touch their money.
Yeah.
Touch their money and they listen immediately. Up until then, everything is just stupidity. And so taking part in astroturfed protests, put it this way, anything that the mainstream media covers is a fraud. They're not going to cover, that song that said the revolution will not be televised, it will never be televised. It might be YouTubed by folks like us, but it will never be televised by CNN and MSNBC, Fox News, et cetera, et cetera. They're all counter-revolutionaries, and they're agents of the status quo. So the true revolution is when us, the common folks, unite and do something organic. And so the Wildcat Strike 2020, Wildcat Strike USA 2021 is an attempt to do just that. And initially it was launched on January 20th to coincide with the inauguration, but I knew that it's not going to happen that same day. And in fact, it's kind of crazy. Right around that same time frame is when the strike happened in New York. The Teamsters grocery workers struck on that, I think on the 20th or the 21st. So these things could happen. But what we need, we'll never know when it's going to happen, right? The Arab Spring, when that happened, it was a fruit seller in Tunisia, burning himself up because of the unfair treatment that he was getting that led to change sweeping throughout the Arab world. So that could happen. We just need a catalyst. So what we're trying to do is we're laying down all the pretext where like we're laying down all the kindling wood, and we just need a spark. And so if you go to the GhionJournal.com/wildcat -strike, it would kind of lay out what this is about. And the same way I handed out thousands of cards to the U.S. military, I printed out the same thing for the Wildcat Strike and drove up and down before I got COVID-19. Drove up and down 95, heading them out to truck stops. And again, the response I got was pretty overwhelming, and I've been giving them out to a bunch of workers everywhere as well. But like I said, we somehow need to just muster the will to do this. And, it doesn't have to be that much. The most vital ones, by the way, are truckers. If they are, they have this trucker speak, dump your load and park your rigs. If they dump their load and park their rigs right on the interstate highways, shit gets shut down immediately.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so I'm hoping truckers use your CBs. I used to have a CB when I was a little kid. So you get on your CVs, and these days they don't even use the CVs as much. They use social media and their phones. Just spread the word, and I'm hoping that we get to that point. If not, what we're seeing, this is the tip of the iceberg. Joe, 3 weeks ago, before the South African variant got announced, I wrote, and I'm not a prophet. I just know these things because they're so transparent with their bigotry. I wrote, it's a matter of time within a week or so that a new variant, a new mutation is going to emerge from, and it's going to somehow emerge from Africa, some country in Africa, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They're going to say, oh my God, this is deadly, right?
Yeah.
And within a week, the South African variant got introduced. So now they call Trump a racist because he said it was the Wuhan virus. And here's racist, bigoted Joe Biden and the Democrats, going around saying the South African variant. It's just astounding. And so now he's going to use that as a pretext, which he's already announced, by the way, to deploy more military, mass vaccinations. Yep. And it's like a frog in a boiling cauldron. Slowly, they're increasing the temperature. One day we're going to wake up and we're going to have all our freedoms taken, and they're going to force us to take the vaccine.
Right, because I just brought this up earlier on our show today. I had to memorize the Declaration of Independence when I was younger. And in your article about the wild strike, or in your page about the wild strike, wildcat strike, you quoted a part of the Declaration of Independence that says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever," and this is the part I repeated in a speech, and I think people got a little bit like, whoa, she said that. "Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness." So this is the Declaration of Independence giving Americans the foundation and the okay to say, if your government isn't providing what they should be providing, you have the power to basically overthrow it. And so people don't talk about these things. Like it's right there. If you're going to be a strict constitutionalist, a patriot, these things are right there. And like right now, we're at a moment where a lot of people are taking up arms and they're so distrusting of the government, where I think you're right. This is absolutely happening. I mean, this is the American right, and the American, if you have any sort of pride in being an American, then you have to fight for your country to be representative of who you are and who everybody is. And right now, that's not happening. So
yeah.
Oh, did you read the Declaration of Independence? I didn't know you were a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
Well, this talks about a part over here about the Declaration of Independence where you can go back and you can take it back. We were talking about Mussolini, and well, what did they do with Mussolini? They hung his ass out there for people to see. You know what I'm saying?
By the way, Thomas Jefferson also said every generation there should be a revolution.
Yeah.
There's a reason that he said that, by the way. And by the way, this is not to co-sign to everything that he did, obviously, but some of the most flawed men in history, they had some aspects of them that were redemptive. I'll take Thomas Jefferson any day over this devilish man that we celebrate named Alexander Hamilton, a Federalist. Alexander Hamilton is who aborted the revolution.
Yep.
Thomas Jefferson advocated that we actually keep revolting every generation.
Yep.
So there's a reason why they celebrate Hamilton.
Because Jefferson had slaves.
Yeah,
but they all had slaves.
Oh, it doesn't make. Well, then why don't we impeach George Washington?
I'll be a conspiracy theorist. No, George Washington had slaves. It's just, if you go down that path, then all the founders pretty much, go out the window. But like I said, we all know the flaws of the founders. Some, even though they didn't necessarily follow their own advice, their writings were astounding, including Thomas Jefferson. Like I said, I wish he followed his own advice instead of sleeping with the slaves, but there's a price he paid for that, I'm for sure.
Conspiracy theorist, my man, you are. Just kidding. Hey, listen, Tio, we got to get you out of here right now and stuff like that, and we'll continue this conversation. I know you sent us an article. You want to talk about the military. We don't have time. We got to keep this nice, short, and compact. But we'll get together again and talk about this, because I think there's a whole show we should dedicate to the letters you were giving out to people in the military, because you're going to say there's going to be a time where they're going to have to make a choice, and that's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about the artillery we have out there, especially I'm in the United States Navy, man, ex-sub guy. I'm a bubblehead, whatever you want to call me. It's dangerous to see if Americans start fighting Americans out there, and there's a split, like a real civil war nowadays. It ain't no joke. It ain't like get your musket, go in charge. It's like who's controlling what, bombs beyond bombs, and it can get hairy there. And how will we know and get the information out there to the soldiers? And I could just only see them being split, because they digest and take what's given to them, the information and the news that's given to them, and they're not always open or find a way to find independent media or independent voices like yourself. So I think it's something that we have to talk about in the future, and it's really scary if you think about it. So,
I think that the good thing about this is, like, when in Russia, for example, when Putin or tyrants in the past try to put down rebellions, they would get military from Siberia, right? That's completely disconnected from Moscow, right? And they would come in, they have no connection to this community, and they would just brutally put them down. Same thing in China. You try to put down a rebellion in Wuhan or whatever, then they bring in somebody from Western China. You can't do that in America. As much as we're different, we have a common fabric in America. So it's very hard for them to just unleash the full force of might of the U.S. military against their own people. It ain't going to happen. And like I said, I've been cultivating a relationship with the military for a very long time. I used to work at Busan Hamilton. In fact, I was the same level as Edward Snowden. I was an associate at Busan Hamilton. I used to work at the Pentagon. I used to work at Fort Belvoir. I used to work at Walter Reed Hospital. I supported Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force. And I've built up a lot of connections with the military to this day. And they read what I write. And there's a lot of them that's on my email list. There's a lot of them that text message me all the time. So, like I said, I'm just waiting for that spark. And so when that moment comes, the leadership class better be leery, because take a hint from what happened to Mussolini.
Or what happened to Marie Antoinette.
Exactly. Yeah, she became a basket case.
Let them have $600. Okay.
You can eat cake. Tio, this is an amazing conversation. You're a cool cat. I'd love to have more conversations with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I got you. We text on a regular basis, and let's continue this conversation regardless of whatever YouTube does to us. They're not going to shut us up. They're not going to slow us down. Teodrose out there for a wildcat strike 2021. Just imagine it, ladies and gentlemen. Then parking their rigs with their trailers right on the freeway and say no more, and let's just shut this shit down. Where else can we find you?
I write all the time, even going through this COVID craziness at www.ghion and then journal.com. And of course, you can catch me on Twitter at Teodrose instead of Fikremariam, which is Fikre, one word. And also you can follow us at Ghion Journal on Twitter as well. I'm the most active on Twitter. They're the ones that have the least fascism about them compared to Facebook.
Jesus.
Hold my beer, says Jack Dorsey.
He's coming.
Hold my beer, says Jack Dorsey.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Theo, for this conversation. We'll have you back on.
Thank you so much.
All right, for Pasta Jardula
Fiorella,
and Teodrose.
Convo out. See you guys soon.